Hi friends, today I'm going to be reviewing the movie Relic starring Natalie Mortimer, Robin Naveen, and Bella Heathcote, written and directed by Natalie Erica James. Hi friends, welcome back to my channel Tea Critiques, but you can call me Tia. I review books and movies, specifically horror and thriller films, so if you like either one of those things, please subscribe below so you don't miss any more of my videos. So today I'm going to be reviewing the movie Relic. This is my favorite kind of horror because even though it has the supernatural elements, it's scary, it's creepy, it's suspenseful, it also has a solid story to back it up. If you can strip away all the supernatural elements and still have a solid story there to back it all up, I think that is the best kind of horror because it becomes relatable to the viewer and therefore scarier. I like to call this kind of horror smart horror because it's not just scary and full of supernatural elements, it also has deeper meaning to it. There's a depth there. It might even be trying to teach you something, such as like the movie Get Out. It uses supernatural elements to tell real stories about human conditions and experiences, so that is why I call it smart horror. And I definitely think Relic is one of those types of horror movies. So just a warning to you guys, there will be spoilers in this review, but not till the end of the video. The first part of the video will just be me giving you my spoiler-free review, and then if you stick around, I will be warning you when the spoilers will be coming, because I like to talk about the ending of the film and just what I got from the film, what I interpreted the film to mean. So what is Relic about? Basically, grandmother Edna goes missing, and so her daughter Kay and Kay's daughter Sam come to the house to look for her, basically. Even though Edna's not there when they get there, it is very clear just from the environment of the house that something is wrong. The house is in disarray, it's cluttered, there's rooms in the house that are just full of junk, there's mold on the walls. It's just clear that the house is not being taken care of, and also the mother is missing. There's also post-it notes all over the house that say things like flush the toilet or take the pills, and so it's clear that the mother is forgetting things and needing to remind herself by writing these post-it notes. And when the mother does end up returning to the house a couple days later, there's clearly something up with her. She's dirty and messy and won't really tell them where she was. And she's kind of like forgetful and detached and aloof, and so both the house and the mother, there's something going on. Now, she is an 80-year-old woman, so her behavior is just kind of chalked up to her being 80 years old, aging, being forgetful, and possibly maybe even dementia. So Kay and Sam both are debating about how to take care of her, what they should do. Kay wants to put her in a home, basically, and Sam wants to move in with her grandmother and take care of her. It's very clear that, this is not a close-knit family. Kay is a workaholic, and so she doesn't really spend a lot of time with her mother. She doesn't really talk to her on the phone on a regular basis. She's grown very distant from her mother, and then the same can be true with Kay and her daughter Sam. They don't seem to talk a lot. Kay is very judgmental of Sam's life choices. I mean, Sam calls her mother Kay, so I think that speaks to the nature of their relationship. And so there's just a lot of estrangement? I think that's a word, going on between the three of them. And so throughout the movie, there's a lot of there's the ongoing theme of caregiving and mother and daughter relationships that's also rooted in guilt. Each of them gives solid performances, especially the grandmother Edna, who, ranges from being like this sweet, caring grandmother, and then also being this like sinister, kind of creepy, decaying character, and she does both of those very well. And even though they're not an actual real family, they really feed off each other as actors, and they do feel like a real family, even though they're estranged. One of the most important questions to ask when you watch horror movies that have supernatural elements is the movie scary? And in this case, yes, the movie is scary, but it's not like a jump scare kind of scare. It's a slow burn, and I definitely appreciated that because, you know, a lot of horror movies, you know, they're kind of lazy in their attempt to scare you. They do a lot of jump scares, and it's very easy to scare viewers by just having a cat, you know, jump into the screen, or having the evil being just kind of pop up out of nowhere, and so you'll definitely get a reaction from that. But I think that if you can make me scared without doing the jump scare thing, I think that means you know how to tell a really scary story. If you can scare your viewers, you know, with like a creature kind of pacing in the background, or by just imagery, or by like not throwing things in people's faces, then I think that is a testament to raw talent, and I appreciate that type of horror. So yes, it is a slow burn, but it's definitely worth it. There is something looming in the house, and that presence is definitely scary. The house itself is its own character. You know, it makes a lot of noise, it's molding, it's decaying. It's also, at some points, it starts to shift and move and become very disorienting and claustrophobic, and so that itself is really creepy. And then also the grandma Edna, you know, her whole demeanor is pretty creepy. She talks to herself sometimes. She looks at you like, you know, she wants to do something bad to you. She looks very detached, and sometimes she just stands there. And so yeah, she herself is really scary. And so, you know, you have the house, you have the grandmother, and you have this looming figure. As character, her behavior escalates. You know, I feel like the more Sam and Kay become worried about her, and the more they want to kind of control, you know, her living situation and try to be protective of her and take care of her, the more she lashes out and becomes belligerent and erratic and kind of violent. And I think that makes sense because, you know, she doesn't want to give up her autonomy and her freedom, and so she's lashing out, and it becomes really kind of creepy at the end of the film. And so yeah, the last 30 minutes of the film are solid. So even though it is a slow burn, when you get to that, you know, the final 30 minutes, it definitely is, you know, a great payoff. But the movie is not just scary. There's also a lot of emotion in this film. You know, this relationship between Edna, between Kay, between Sam. It's all very emotional and raw and powerful. And, you know, just a lot of scenes that really, without even supernatural elements, will definitely affect you as a viewer. There's this one scene in particular where Edna is scared, and she asks her daughter Kay to look under the bed for her because she thinks there's something under the bed. And, you know, Kay's like, there's something under the bed, you know? So it just kind of like shows how like the roles have reversed, and, you know, usually it's the child asking the mother to look under the bed for the monster, but in this case it's switched, and, you know, now the daughter has to take care of the mother and look under the bed and make sure that, and tell her that everything's going to be okay. And so yeah, there's a lot of powerful scenes like that, and a lot of emotional scenes like that I would love to get into, but obviously I don't want to give you all the spoilers. But yeah, you're not just going to be scared in this film, you're also going to, you know, have a lot of emotion and maybe feel sad at certain times and feel, you know, a heartwarming kind of love that they're displaying with one another, especially near the end of the film. The atmosphere itself is really creepy. You know, the house is, like I said, decaying. It's kind of gray and dark and gloomy. They're pretty much in the house for most of the movie, so it kind of makes you feel kind of isolated and stuck. And, you know, there's just a lot of scenes in the movie that make you feel disoriented and confused, along with the main character Edna, who's also going through the same emotions you are. So it's a solid movie in my opinion, and I'm gonna give you my rating right now, which I believe, in my opinion, I'm giving the film 4.5 out of 5. It's scary, it's smart horror, it's suspenseful, it's a solid story as well, and it's heartfelt, so, you know, you get a range of emotions, and I definitely appreciated that. Alright, but now I'm going to be getting into some spoilers. So if you haven't watched the movie, go and watch the movie, come back and finish the rest of this video, and then discuss it in the comments with me. I love to discuss movies, I love to discuss endings, so yeah, come back after you finish watching the movie. So, I watched Relic a couple of times. The first time I watched it was a few months ago, and at that point, you know, I just watched it because I wanted to be scared. And so the second time I watched it was a couple days ago. It came on Netflix, so I watched it, and this time I watched it more for the psychological elements. So I had two different experiences while watching this film, both of them solid. So what is this movie about at a more deeper level? This movie is about Alzheimer's and the way that it affects the mind, the body, and a family. This idea that, you know, there's something coming for Edna, there's something lurking in the house that's coming to get her, and at the end of the day, you know, it's really this debilitating disease that's coming for her, and she can feel it, you know, coming for her and taking parts of her, definitely affecting her mind and her physicality. There are multiple, you know, physical interpretations of Alzheimer's in this film. Of course, the mother would be, or sorry, Edna would be one of them, but then also the house itself. It goes through the same experiences as the mother. It's decaying, it's falling apart, it's full of mold, it's cluttered, it becomes claustrophobic and disorienting, and that is all a representation of what is going on in Edna's mind. And so you can see it play out with the house and with Edna. Another physical representation is shown on the mother's body. She has this black bruise that's on her chest, and it seems to be growing and expanding, and I think that is a physical representation of the progression of the disease. You know, the more it grows, the more her mind goes with it. Another thing I liked about this film is that the mother, Kay and Sam, become fearful, like really fearful of the mother as the disease takes more of her, and as her behavior then shifts with the disease, her body also starts to physically decay. And I think this is, and you know, they at the beginning of the film, all they want to do is take care of her and be with her, and then near the end of the film, all they want to do is get away from her because they're in fear and they can't stand to look at her. And now there's the actual relic itself. In my opinion, the relic is this, there's like this stained glass window that's on the front door of Edna's house. It's colorful, it's bright, and it's plastered right on the front door. We learned that that relic, or that stained glass, belonged to it was once on the cabin that they owned, and their Kay's great-grandfather lived in that cabin, and he eventually started losing his mind, and he was alone, and he ended up dying alone. After they demolished the cabin, Edna took the stained glass and constructed it into her front door. And so that is a physical representation of, you know, hereditary disease and genetic diseases that are carried down through generations, and the relic definitely represents that. So when it was on the cabin, it was with the grandfather, and he was dealing with Alzheimer's alone, and he definitely didn't have family with him, and so he ended up dying alone. And now that it's on Edna's front door, she herself is dealing with Alzheimer's. The difference is that she's not alone. She's with her daughter and her granddaughter. So let's get into the ending of the film and my explanation of the ending of the film. So Sam ends up finding this new section of the house in this closet that she's been scared to go into because it kind of makes noise and it has mold on the walls. But she goes into the closet, it's cluttered, and she actually starts moving things around, and that's when she sees this like new section of the house. And for some reason she goes exploring into this new area of the house, and she's taken on this weird maze-like journey, and she starts to see like there's a bunch of junk in there, you know, and there's also post-it notes that say things like, "My mother has green eyes." And so she starts to get lost in this like maze-like new section of the house. And in my opinion, that's a representation of, you know, Alzheimer's disease and of what the grandmother is going through. She's almost in the recesses of her grandmother's mind, and you know, the post-it notes that say those things are like little pieces of memory that are still within the grandmother's mind, but it's still, her mind is still full of clutter and junk that, you know, these post-it notes are being, you know, shadowed by all of the junk. And so Sam actually gets to go through what her grandmother is experiencing while she's going through this like maze-like wonder of the house. She does eventually break through the wall, and she gets reunited with her mother. Her mother is actually trying to get away from Edna because Edna has grown to become very belligerent and violent, and her form has changed, and her body is decaying, and she's violent, and so Edna's trying to, sorry, there's so many like names to remember. And so Kay is trying to get away from her mother, and she's reunited with her daughter, and they basically are both running away from the mother, and they end up physically fighting the mother off of them because, like I said, the mother is being very violent. So they end up physically fighting the mother off of her, and as they turn to leave, because all they want to do is get away from her, Kay hears her mother say her name, and that stops her in her tracks, and she makes the impulsive decision to stay. She ends up taking her mother to the bed and starts peeling away at her flesh. Now, this scene was really hard for me to watch, and I'm not going to deny it. I barely watched this part of the movie. I was like this, and I was like telling my boyfriend to please tell me what's happening because I can't handle that type of like gore. But yeah, she ends up peeling away at her mother's flesh, and what is revealed is like this, you know, hardened ink, thick, black, kind of skeletal interior, and it's really hard to look at. But her mother is there now with her bare and vulnerable, and instead of Kay turning away and being like, I can't take this, I can't handle it, she decides to stay with her. And I think that's a very powerful and emotional scene where her daughter, you know, at the beginning of the movie wanted to put her in a home, and now she's laying there with her mother who's, you know, bare and not really something you want to look at because, you know, it's her skeleton, but she decides to stay. It ends with 3 generations in a bed together. Sam ends up joining them, and so now Kay, Sam, and Edna are all curled up on the bed together, and Sam ends up noticing a black, you know, kind of looking bruise thing on her mother's back. And so that's, you know, a representation of the fact that Alzheimer's is also in her genes and maybe one day might start to take over her body and mind. And so that was a really heartbreaking scene because, you know, it's Sam coming to the realization that she may have to one day take care of her mother, and that her mother may also go through the same thing that Edna's going through. The last shot is of the relic, which is the stained glass. It kind of, you know, spans away from the 3 of them, and it shows the relic, the stained glass, and kind of pans out. And that is the representation of the genetic disease. But what I liked about it was that behind that stained glass were 3 people curled up together and refusing to leave each other's side, which, like I said before, whereas the grandfather was by himself and ended up dying alone of Alzheimer's disease, and none of his family members were there for him, that's not what's going on now. And, you know, even though Alzheimer's is unforgiving, it's an unforgiving, brutal disease, and it carries down through generations. And even though that is happening, the difference is that, you know, the level of care is changing in the family. And so they're going to be there for each other regardless of, you know, how debilitating and hard the disease is. And yeah, so that's my interpretation of the film and the ending. And like I mentioned earlier, I give this film a 4.5 out of 5. And yeah, I hope everyone watches this movie because there's so many different layers to it, and I enjoyed it definitely for the storytelling, for the scary level, for the creep factor. It was very suspenseful, slow burn, but definitely a payoff in the end. And so if you've watched it and you have your own opinions about the ending or about what I've said, please comment below. All right, friends, until next time.